right.
Hey everybody, welcome to the RockerMike and Rob Presents show. I'm RockerMike. We got Rob Rossi, top right. How you doing, Rob?
Pretty good today.
All right, good. And today we have special guest, nationally syndicated radio host Frank Morano. I am honored to have you on this show today, Frank.
Well, Mike, one good turn deserves another. You've been a rock star when you've been on with me. You've been great, and I'm eager to have you back on the show. And I'm happy to come on your show as well.
Oh, fantastic! Yes, glad to see you. The last time I saw you, I was on your show back in August, and we had a great time talking at 2:00 in the morning about New York City history and everything like that.
Exactly.
What were you talking about, like CBGBs and Mexican?
No. We were doing true crime stuff.
David Berkowitz again?
Yeah, all that. So we got you on today because I guess it was a month ago or so. I'm sitting there reading the paper and I see your name. You're running for the 51st council seat of the New York City Council on Staten Island.
That's true.
Staten Island.
That's true.
And I said, wow. I said, he's getting into politics. And I said, let me reach out. And this is a seat that's currently held by Joe Borelli. And he is planning to step down very soon. And he has given his full blessing to you, as well as some other endorsements. We'll talk about that. But Frank, I got to ask you, this is your first jump into politics, right?
Well, I've been active in politics for a long time. I've certainly paid attention to it for a long time. I've been involved in a lot of campaigns, but this is the first time I've run for office. Yeah.
Okay. So why now? What's the time now that makes it good for you? Why?
You know, first of all, I don't know that there's ever a good time, honestly. So the seat became open because Joe was term limited. Joe was a close friend, and sort of it was a confluence of a number of issues. And I'll be honest, a lot of people run for office and they're sure when the opportunity comes that they're going to run. I really went back and forth on this for a while, in part, you were kind enough to mention the nationally syndicated overnight radio show that we're doing. The show is doing great, both in New York and around the country. We're getting great ratings. We're, I think, doing a lot of content that I'm proud of, and we just keep getting picked up in more and more markets. But a couple of things happened. One, where I was concerned about who would be taking over for Joe, because Joe has done a great job and he's kind of elevated what this seat can be and what the holder of this kind of a seat can be. And I was concerned about who would come after him. But I live in Staten Island, grew up in the South Shore of Staten Island my entire life. Every single person that I grew up with, my cousins, my siblings, everybody that I played ball with growing up, the only thing they all have in common is they all moved off of Staten Island. And so many neighbors that I have, they fantasize about moving off Staten Island, especially if they're city workers. They act almost as if they're prisoners, counting the days until they can be liberated, etching the numbers on the wall because they want to make sure they're pension eligible and then go to Florida or Arizona or North Carolina. So I've been very cognizant of this Staten Island exodus, which has fueled an economic boom in 5 other states. Right. But ultimately, it comes down to my son. I have a 3-year-old, and I really would like to be able to say to him when he has to determine where he wants to live as an adult, that I did everything that I could to keep you here, right? And to make Staten Island the kind of place for him that it was when I was growing up. So that is my modus operandi. I think I would enjoy the job. I think given my talents, my skill sets, my strengths, and my relationships over the years, I think I could do the job well. And I figured what better to give it a shot and not have it work out than regret not having tried.
Well, I absolutely have no doubt you would do the job well. That's for sure.
Thank you.
I had a little experience with that when I got the 12,000 signatures to try to run for mayor.
That's right.
Yes, I got 12,000 signatures, but then I was like, all the paperwork you had to do, you had to pick a treasurer, you had to pick this, you got to pick people.
It's brutal. It's brutal. I didn't know that, Rob.
And the paperwork, it was like, what the hell am I doing this for? And then they acted so much Then they start looking to your finance and stuff, and they say, "Oh, Jesus Christ, this is insane." It's a lot of work, man. It's a lot of paperwork.
That it is. The one thing New York City has been masterful at is creating bureaucracy and opportunities for paperwork.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
it's a lot of paperwork. You almost gotta get like a secretary and put all the stuff in. But I was gonna go to the mansion funds.
Yeah. I'm going through this whole process now. It's like I'm afraid to say anything negative about the campaign finance board because I don't want them to slow down my matching fund. But look, that's it's every day is a different form that you need to file.
Yeah, you gotta give them a ton of form. I know a girl named Beth that works down there. She's pretty good at. She was helping me.
Put in a good word for me. Put in a good word for me.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So she works for it, but she's been working at home because she got cancer. But she works for the mansion funds.
I'm sorry to hear that.
You know, Richie's wife. That's who she works. Because Richie works for the city.
Okay.
Richie is actually a building inspector for New York City. So
nice.
Yeah. Okay, so what you just said about people leaving Staten Island, that's something that I think is, from what I could see, is citywide, really.
Yeah.
Okay. All growing up my life, okay, the idea was you work here, you make your money, and you hopefully you get a pension or something, and you retire down to Florida. That kind of was what everybody was doing. New York itself is, I think, number 49 out of 50 states as a place to retire to. It's just too expensive.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. People can't afford to live here, which is one of the things. I mean, obviously, I'm a one of 51, but that's one of the things I'd like to work to change. But it's also just this sense of getting down on Staten Island, getting down on New York. For some people, it's about the political climate. For some people, it's about the feeling of being unsafe because you see stories of people getting lit on fire as they're waiting for the subway. For some people, it's about trash. For some people, it's not wanting to sit in traffic for an hour and a half to get to work and now have to pay for the privilege of driving to work. So everyone's got a different complaint. And I have them too. I'm not, sitting here with rose-colored glasses, but I will at least be able to use the bully pulpit to give voice to those complaints and give voice to those concerns for Staten Islanders. And honestly, for all outer borough, middle-class, ethnic New Yorkers.
Do you feel that the outer boroughs, in particular Staten Island, get forgotten about?
Yes. Are you kidding? I mean, I think Staten Island's got maybe 5% of the population. I think we pay 20% of the taxes, and we have 1% of the influence. Yes. I mean, it's like they keep us in mind that we're part of New York City only for the bad stuff, right? When it comes time to having a subway, we don't have that.
Right.
But we want to make sure that even though there's no rats on my block, that you have to you can't put your trash out before 8:30. If you put it out before 8:30, we're going to fine you. You're part of New York City for that. We don't have street cleaning, but you're part of New York City when it comes to paying the congestion pricing fee. We don't have a subway connection to the rest of the city, but we want to make sure you're part of New York City when it comes to forcing everybody to pay $50 to buy a new garbage pail, even if you don't need one. So yeah, I feel that's the kind of methodology and the modus operandi behind my whole campaign, where we're treated horribly by City Hall. And I'm not going to say that you elect me and people are going to snap their fingers and all of a sudden start treating Staten Island better. But I'm going to tell you, it's not going to be without a fight.
I've always felt, and I think everybody that I ever knew on Staten Island kind of gave me this impression, is that, a lot of it, the reason it's forgotten about is because a lot of people vote Republican.
I think that's part of it. Staten Island has gotten redder over the last 8 years, I think in part due to Donald Trump. But there were a lot of Democrats elected on Staten Island. And it's not as if when those Democrats were in power that all of a sudden the rest of the city and the state was responsive to Staten Island's needs. No, there have been we have a Democratic district attorney. Up until recently, we had a Democratic congressman. Up until recently, half of the state legislative delegation was Democratic. So we were more of a purple borough. Now I would say we're a red borough.
Definitely red.
Well, in particular,
yeah.
the South Shore where you're representing would represent. That's always been pretty red, I think.
Yeah, the South Shore was always solidly conservative. The North Shore was always solidly Democratic, and the Mid Island was kind of a swing district. Perfect. Now the Mid Island has swung to totally the Republican side.
Right. Well, I mean, you saw that in the last election. Every single state, swung to the right.
Brooklyn's going a little bit red too, believe it or not.
Everywhere is.
You're exactly right, Rob. And I think part of the reason for that is, believe it or not, immigrant communities. A lot of people love to portray the Republicans as being anti-immigrant. But if you look at what's driving the Republican resurgence in Brooklyn, it's the Asian population, it's the Russian population, and to some extent, it's the Orthodox Jewish population.
But you're exactly right. Conservative too. A lot of Latino people don't realize that a lot of Latino pretty much red.
I'm so glad you mentioned that. You're exactly right. That's certainly my observation out here in Staten Island.
Because there's a lot of Hispanic people, there's a lot of Italian. All these people tend to be very conservative. That's the way they grew up. They're Catholic. They grew up and go to church on Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, they also don't want unsafe streets and things like that, and and paying a lot in taxes to have it given away to migrants either.
Yeah, that's crazy too. But you know what the problem is? That's as bad as all the crime has happened. We're still one of the safest cities in the world, believe it or not, because we got like 8 million people. And
you're exactly right. That's such a good point, Rob. I think part of it is just the fact that things are starting to go into the other direction. And part of it also is that unlike the bad old days that we all remember, the late 80s, early 90s, where there was,
it wasn't that bad.
No. Well, there were 2,700 murders a year. But in those days, it seemed like there were certain neighborhoods that you knew to stay away from. Now, violent crime, such as it exists, you kind of get the impression that it's not necessarily limited to one particular block. My district right now, knock on wood, is still very safe, but there's still the possibility that things may tack the other way.
Yeah, but you know what's still bad? East New York always been bad, no matter how much they tried to gentrify. You want to go to Red Hook. Now Red Hook is like, look, it's Red Hook. Or you want to go to Greenpoint? Now it's beautiful. It's nice.
It's
Come
true.
over here.
It's true.
Even Flatbush, everything's changing so much.
Well, all that was made possible from Rudy Giuliani.
Oh, no question. No question.
Changing the landscape forever. Okay. Yeah. And changing these neighborhoods forever, making it hip and cool to live here and all that. It was a double-edged sword. We lost a little bit of our flavor, but at the same time, I'd rather have a safe neighborhood.
Yeah, I agree with you. There's a sweet spot, right? You don't want to worry about getting mugged every time you take the train, but you don't want to see the dingy neighborhood coffee shop or diner replaced with a Starbucks and an Au Bon Pain.
Yeah. Now let me ask you, Frank. Now, in the past, you've kind of, from what I can see, you've categorized yourself as an independent. Mm-hmm. Okay. What made you go to the Republican Party, and what's changed over the last few years that maybe made you think on those lines of becoming a Republican?
Really, it all comes down to Donald Trump, right? I had no interest in being a part of the kind of Republican Party of George Bush and Mitt Romney and John McCain. Not for me. You can have it. Trump, really, to me, not only did I agree with him on a lot of the issues, namely the border, not getting involved in endless foreign wars, not letting all this warrantless wiretapping go on, fair trade instead of free trade. He really spoke my language on all of that, eschewing too much of this political correctness, which is not for me. But really making the Republican Party, rather than a country club elitist party, into a working class and middle class party. So, 15 years ago, if you met someone that was making 7 figures and was Ivy League educated and was belonged to a country club, you knew for sure that person was a Republican.
Right.
At a union construction worker or a guy, just a working guy in the neighborhood, you knew for sure that guy was a Democrat. Now, under Trump, those roles have completely reversed. And in my view, Trump sort of transformed the Republican Party into a working class and middle class party. And the Democrats have kind of just retained the worst elements of what was part of their coalition. There's still a lot of great Democrats out there, but the party seems dominated by the obsession over silly woke issues of, you know, what pronoun you can use and things of that nature. It all comes down to Trump for me. And the concern I had also was during the primaries, seeing the other people running that weren't Trump. And my concern is what happens after Trump, right? Is it going to go back? Is Trump going to be a blip on the radar screen and it's going to go back to being the party of Lindsey Graham and Nikki Haley and Mitt Romney? Or has the party been permanently changed into a more populist, independent direction? My hope is that it's the latter, and I'd like to be a part of that change. So that's kind of what I'm working towards.
You know what I think the Republican Party did that's so good? That they go, even though Trump is older, but they got a lot of young Republicans that are ready to come out with, you know, and take over. I mean, these guys are bright guys. You know, you can say whatever about JD, but I think the guy's good. I like him.
I completely agree. I completely agree.
He's young.
I think it's so much more than youth and energy, though, which you're right. He has both, but I think he's able to give a level of intellectual heft to Trumpism that I don't know that we've seen in a national political figure before. He's really, I think, incredibly impressive.
I believe he's a great mouthpiece for the whole movement.
And again, I don't want to make this a commercial for, you know, Republicanism, but if you look at kind of the big tent that Trump has put together, you got Elon Musk, who was not historically a Republican or a conservative. You've got Tulsi Gabbard, who was always a lifelong Democrat. You've got Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who was always a lifelong Democrat. Yeah. You had what party was having the president of the Teamsters speak at their convention? It wasn't the Democrats. Trump really has turned this into a big tent party where organized labor and people that have a lot of differing views can feel welcome. And I think it's a great thing.
Yeah. I mean, I what I see and have seen for the last 10 years with Trump is just this inclusiveness with, you know, young people, but also labor. I came out of 27 years in Communication Workers of America. Okay. I was a phone technician.
Great.
And, when I came into the company, it was, you know, Democrat, hardcore, all that. When I left the company, not so much. Okay, the executives of the union, yes, okay, but not the rank and file. And I think that's pretty much across the board with all the unions. And you have to thank Donald Trump for that, because he's made this populist movement, and he's opened so many eyes. Now, but bringing it back to New York City, and in particular Staten Island. You mentioned wokeism, woke stuff. Okay, how much of that is a reason maybe people are leaving Staten Island?
I think it's significant, honestly, and that's one of the things that I think is most easily remedied. You know, I think it's a big part of it. You know, there now the state legislature is pursuing a commission for reparations for slavery. Now, you know, I feel awful about slavery. Slavery was a terrible institution, but my family never had slaves. And my family wasn't even in the country at the time. So I don't know. The whole idea of reparations strikes me as completely unjust, that I, the descendant of someone who never had slaves, should have my tax money taken from me and given to someone who was never a slave. So, and yet that's what the state legislature thinks it's a good idea to focus on now. I mean, it's almost the equivalent of, Nero fiddling while Rome is burning. I mean, speaking of burning, I'm all for clean air. I consider myself an environmentalist. I'm for clean air and clean water. I don't know how we think the solution to cleaning up the environment is to ban gas ovens and gas stoves.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It's just, if you make a list of all the important issues that regular New Yorkers are dealing with right now, you go down the list, and I don't see the current leadership in the state or the city doing much to address most of them.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, crime issues and stuff like that are kind of being pushed to the side. Also, and I got to get into it, the congestion pricing, okay? I'm not sure what you could do as a councilman. I mean, I guess you can speak out against it, but I mean, how this is affecting Staten Island in a big way, and the whole city, of course. What's your opinion on it?
Oh, I mean, I think it's a disaster. And it's not just because I pay this with driving into work. By the way, I don't drive into work because I'm anti-mass transit. I'm pro-mass transit. I drive into work because my district, the South Shore of Staten Island, is a mass transit desert. It'd take me another 2 hours to get to work every night if I relied solely on mass transit. So I don't see why I should be penalized because I happen to live in an area with no mass transit. The whole idea on its face is idiotic because it's not improving congestion. It improves congestion in the congestion pricing zone in Manhattan, but their own studies, meaning the MTA's own studies show it's going to make traffic congestion worse in the areas outside of the congestion pricing zone.
Yeah,
so why don't those communities count? To me, it's like the outer boroughs and surrounding suburban areas are getting spit upon again, and I don't think it's fair. It's also a regressive tax. If Elon Musk and I are taking the same car ride into Manhattan at the same time, that $9 that we're both paying, it takes a big wallop out of my pocket. It doesn't take any wallop outside of Elon Musk's pocket. So it's a crazy situation where the less money you earn, the higher percentage of your income you're paying in taxes. It's fundamentally unjust. And honestly, I could take it more seriously if the MTA seemed more concerned with doing something to stamp out fare evasion. But we're losing hundreds of millions of dollars a year to fare evasion. It's probably the most mismanaged state agency there is. And yet their solution is to get me to pay another $9 a day. It's ridiculous. So in terms of what you can do, I can give voice to it. I'm hopeful that President Trump is going to be able to terminate this on a national level. There's bipartisan legislation in Congress sponsored by Republican Nicole Maliotakis, Democrat Josh Gottheimer, to try and terminate it. So we'll see where it goes, but I will be part of every effort to roll back congestion pricing.
And I got to say, just to mention quick, Nicole Maliotakis gave you a very nice endorsement too.
She is great. Honestly, she and I have been friends for about 25 years. Yeah. And she's really somebody, even though, we're peers, she's really someone that I look up to and I'm going to seek to emulate in public service.
And just to mention, too, you got Andrew Lanza, Joe Borelli, obviously, and former Councilman Vincent Ignizio.
They're all great except for that Vinny Ignizio. He's the worst. No, Vinny is one of my closest friends. He's best man at my wedding, and he's actually in my house right now. He probably can hear me making this comment. So yeah.
Hey, you want to hear something interesting? You know why the Staten Island ferry is free?
Well, it became free under the Giuliani era.
You know what's one of the big reasons? Because everybody has a right to be able to walk to City Hall and give the complaint, the grievance.
Yeah, I remember that.
That's very astute, Rob. That was one of the rationales when it was made free, I think in 96 or 97.
Yeah.
Yeah, in his second term, he did that.
Because I remember when the Staten Island Ferry used to ride it, you could drive your car in there and all that kind of stuff. It was
the people from transportation alternatives are going to flip out over this, but I'd love to see that brought back. I think one more transit option is good for people.
Well, they stopped that after 9/11.
That's pretty much
yeah.
Why,
Well, I have to think with all the modern technology that there's a way to do it safely.
Yeah, I did it a couple of times. I remember doing that.
Yeah, when you go in Seattle, there's some place you can still drive your car in, and then you can go up on the ferry, hang out, because that's the only way to get to the island in Seattle. You got to get a ferry. They got cars driving there. They could do it. Why can't we do it? We're one of the greatest cities in the world,
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly my view.
So a friend of mine lives in your district in Great.
Oh, really?
In Great Kills. Yeah, my friend Tony. And I was on the phone with him the other day, and I said to him, what is going on in your district?
Give me his number. I want to go meet him.
I'll be happy to give you his number. And he mentioned that one thing they were concerned about, and maybe you could answer to this as far as what you could do, is there's a rash of car thefts involving home invasions as well, where people are actually you're home, you might be asleep, and people are getting into your house to get to your car, and it's basically a home invasion, and they're trying to steal your car, but they're doing it in a very, brazen way.
Wow.
Mike, I'm so glad you mentioned this, because if I had to pick one public safety problem on the South Shore, that's it. And it's actually, I'm not sure necessarily when this is going to get posted, but I'm going to be in the coming days coming out with a proposal. By the way, people can look at all my issues at moranoforcouncil.com. That's moranoforcouncil.com. One thing that I had already proposed in terms of the auto theft front, because it's not just stealing the car, it's the stealing of the catalytic converters. Yes. What we're seeing is it's mostly people from New Jersey. No disrespect to people from New Jersey, but it's people from Jersey that come here, steal the catalytic converters, steal the cars in a lot of instances, and then go right back to Jersey. I think the easiest way to stop that, and I don't pretend to be an expert in law enforcement, is to set up checkpoints to dissuade them from doing that. I think there needs to be, in coordination with the DA's office and the local police department, checkpoints to prevent auto theft and catalytic converter theft. Now, the other thing that you mentioned, the home invasions. This is a real problem. There's been about 35 home invasions on the South Shore of Staten Island in the last year. People are terrified because if it hasn't happened to them, they've read about it, or it's happened to a friend or a neighbor. And I think what needs to happen is there's got to be a task force, a cooperative task force of New Jersey State Police, maybe New Jersey local police departments, and the NYPD working together hand in hand to put a stop to this, because I see that being the only way that it ends, with this bi-state police task force specifically targeted with stopping home invasion.
Wow. Okay. I mean, yeah, that seems to be the major problem in your district.
Oh, yeah. Definitely. But yeah, please do seriously give me Tony's number. I'd like to reach out.
I'll be happy to. He'd be happy to talk to you. He actually knows Joe Borelli too. So.
Oh, wonderful. Good. I won't hold that against him.
Okay. The other thing I want to bring up is what's been going on with immigration. Okay. Mm-hmm. ICE. They have been coming into New York City in the last couple of weeks since Donald Trump was inaugurated and put that all in effect. The Adams administration, from what I could see it to this point, seems to be somewhat cooperative, but they are also keeping their sanctuary city status. Now, I understand Eric Adams can't go that far, okay, with his Democrat Party and go against that, okay, though he kind of went far when Biden was president and got himself a little jammed up with the comments he made about immigration. Sure. But do you think that as a councilman, okay, if there's a situation where authorities in New York City are not cooperating with ICE, is there anything that you could do? Do you have any authority, or what can you do to make that more process?
It's a great question, and this is really one of the worst aspects of the de Blasio legacy. I mean, New York City always called itself a sanctuary city, going back to the days of Ed Koch and Rudy Giuliani. But the way those guys used the term sanctuary city, they meant it so that if somebody is talking to a police officer, for instance, that they're not going to ask about their immigration status, which is a sound policy. You don't want people afraid to report a crime because they don't want to get deported. Same thing if if the child of an illegal immigrant is in school, we don't want to necessarily have this army of uneducated people that are roaming the streets of New York because we're going to keep them out of school all day. Makes sense. What happened in the last 8 to 9 years is total insanity. De Blasio and the city council actually affirmatively prohibited local law enforcement from cooperating with an ICE detainer request. Now, that's insane. That absolutely needs to end. So what's going on now? The mayor's appointed a charter revision commission. I'm going to be testifying on Tuesday at their hearing, urging them to put this issue on the ballot. Put the issue on the ballot of whether or not New York City should retain its sanctuary city status and let the people vote. I don't think Democrat, Republican, Independent, I don't think New Yorkers are going to vote to affirmatively not cooperate with federal law enforcement. So if the mayor's commission will not put this on the ballot, then I'm trying to organize a petition drive to do this myself, because the voters should not be subjected to the whims of Mayor de Blasio and the previous city council because they wanted to score political points with the hard left. They have to worry about someone that shouldn't even be in this country committing a crime.
Right. I totally agree with that.
That's the solution, I think, is a charter change, hopefully through the Charter Revision Commission. But if the Charter Commission doesn't do it, let's get the signatures and let's put it on the ballot ourselves.
Yeah, I think don't let them in. Very simple. Why are we taking? Well, it's hard enough living in New York that you bring in all these people that they can't speak the language. They're not going to be able to make money. Technology has taken over a lot of stuff. So what are they going to come here? It's almost like
Rob. I completely agree with you. Two things come to mind as you say that. One is, my grandfather, who I was very close to, he was an Italian immigrant, barely spoke English. And my mother and uncle, they barely speak Italian. They don't speak any Italian. Now, how could they, as the children of Italian immigrants, not speak Italian? Because my grandfather and my grandmother, who I didn't really know, they wanted their children to be American and to speak English. So they discouraged speaking Italian in their house. I mean, they wish they spoke better Italian, but their view was, this is our country now. This is the language that we speak here. That's the language you're going to speak. Now, I remember these migrant caravans that were making their way up through Central America, through Mexico to the border. And what were we told? We were told that they're fleeing oppression. They're fleeing being in trouble. They're fleeing violence. Now, and they're being persecuted. Right. Now, you watch the video of these migrant caravans, and they're carrying the flags of the countries that they're supposedly fleeing. Now,
you all got iPhones.
If things are so bad, would you really be flying the flag of a country that you're supposedly desperate to get out of? I'm suspect of the whole thing. The national aspect, I have every confidence is going to improve with Donald Trump and Tom Homan.
The other thing that was real about those migrants, a lot of them were in South America. We got a lot of people from Guyana and stuff. How the hell did they get to the border? Like, what the hell happened? Like, at one point, I thought it was like a militia sneaking in here. These
Rob,
guys were young and kind of military, kind of looking and standing in line, and they were all
that one's above my pay grade.
Guys, aren't we finding out, Rob? Aren't we finding out just very recently that there's NGOs and stuff like that, USAID and all that stuff getting funded. All that money went to these, countries to get these people up through the border.
No, it's a big problem.
When you look at them, they're okay. They're wearing regular clothes. They got phones. They're walking. They're carrying the flag, like you're saying, Frank.
It's crazy.
It's crazy. No, it's a big
Who funded that? Taxpayer dollars funded that.
Yeah, it's
exactly.
So, Frank, you have a special election coming up in the spring, right?
Yes, it's April 29th. I hope people come out and vote. And even if you don't live in the district, people can go to moranoforcouncil.com. They can learn more about me, and they can absolutely make a contribution if they want. If they live in New York City, then it gets matched 8-1.
Nice.
Yeah, that's a matching funds.
Right. So if you give me $10, that becomes $90. It's really something. So people might say, "Oh, what good is my $10 going to do?" It makes a big difference. It becomes $90.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for coming on, Frank Morano, and I'm confident you're going to win this. And,
thank you. I hope so. Yeah. It's going to be tough. I'm meeting voters, and I'm going to meet Tony every single day.
I do got to ask you real quick, what's going to happen to the radio show when you're running? Does it have to go off in New York City?
I don't know. I mean, my discussions with the FCC say that any candidate can request equal time once they're legally qualified for the ballot. As of the time that we're taping this, I'm the only legally qualified candidate. There are other people running. We'll see if they can get the signatures. But assuming they can, I would guess at that point they may put my show on hiatus in New York City, but I'm still on at about 30 other stations around the country. And hopefully people will still be able to listen at WABCradio.com, but I'm following the station's lead on that. Whatever they say, that's what I'll go along with.
Got to do. Yeah, I understand. All right, Frank, thank you very much for coming on. We wish you all the best with this run for city council.
Yep.
And we'll talk to you soon. Okay.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, Mike. I'm looking forward to having you back on the radio. Rob, it's been great talking to you. I'm hoping to come see you for a drink sometime soon.
Oh, you should.
That will be fun. Trust me. He's a good bartender.
Thank you.
All right. Take care, now, everybody.
If we don't get drunk.
Oh, yeah. What do you want to say? What do we say at the end of every show?
We don't get drunk.
We get lumped up.
And we'll see you next time.
All right. Take care, people.
Thank you, fellas.